New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring. And hello again, dear ones. Rev Briz with you over here.
Rev Z right here.
And this is New Thought Today on the New Thought Media Network. It happens every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Mountain Time. We appreciate you being with us. Welcome you aboard for our conversation. As we give everybody a chance to pile into the room, please do feel free to share with a friend, hit the like button, and any other positive affirmation button that you may find on your system there. We sure would appreciate it. And I was reminded of one of my favorite sayings recently, Z, that if you like what you hear here and like what you see here, please share it with a friend. If you don't like what you hear here and share here, well, then share it with somebody you don't like. They probably.
But whatever you do, share.
Whatever you do, share it with somebody, please. So, welcome aboard. We've got a great show in store for you today, and it's quite a little bit of climate shock since where we were this time last week, huh, Z?
Yeah. Last it was sunny and sunny, and now it's cold and cold.
Cold and cold, exactly. It was sunny and sunny. We joke, Reverend Z and I were at the Centers for Spiritual Living spiritual living convention last week in sunny Southern California. It was palm trees and warm sky and warm weather and sunny skies pretty much most of the week. And now here we are in Colorado. It's 0, snowing. Not going to get above freezing tomorrow. Going to snow again on Thursday. And it was just a month or so ago I was bitching about not having enough winter. So here we are.
Yes. Surprise.
All right. Folks, thanks for being with us. Z, I want to kick off. Give us your overall perspective. What was last week for you?
It was a good time for seeing people we hadn't seen and meeting new people. But I think I guess the highlight would be the idea of looking at where we've traversed the last 2 years and trying to figure out what's next in terms of spiritual community, spiritual teachings, and not only how it applies to the general public, but more specifically, how it applies to me individually and how I can contribute to creating a world that works for everyone, which is, one of our mantras. And so from that perspective, it was good. It was exciting. It was a little nervous because people threw down some gauntlets and tell people to step up to the plate. And so it was really good from that perspective. So been doing some self-reflection and trying to plot some new courses. So all is well.
Good. We're going to share a little bit of what we're talking about with you in the next segment, folks. For now, I hope to give you a little bit more of the feel for it. And yes, ministers do have fun and leadership do have fun. And I thought it was a great turnout. Now there was about a 50% of the group that originally registered did not attend and chose to stay home for various reasons, mostly people that did not want to travel to be there. And we had a very rigid testing protocol in place and very rigid masking mandate protocols in place, which were adhered to. And from what I know, I spoke to a few people, not one person tested positive for the virus upon arrival.
Yes.
Now we haven't heard of anybody that has tested positive since coming home, and we're going to trust that remains the way it is. I thought it was a very, very, from the professional standard, a very well-run conference and a very a model for how spiritual communities can be together in a powerful, meaningful, and in a way that we're used to.
Right.
With new protocols and new pieces in place, as it were. So Now, on the philosophical side, wow. This program, folks, if you're new to our program here, we're all about exploring how this mighty philosophy of New Thought is empowered and compelled to serve in the evolution of human consciousness and therefore human experience. And that's
Mhm.
not by just sitting around and pontificating about it and thinking about it. I know we had originally planned, I believe, an outing to get out into the community a little bit more this trip, and normally we do on these conferences. That wasn't able to happen because of the health restrictions and the virus restrictions. But overall, it also reminded me that what we're doing here on New Thought Media Network is really, in many ways, growing edge for any philosophy and
Mhm.
for any organization. It was a good time. I
Yeah,
think pretty sure a good time was had by all.
good time was had by all. And in addition to the good time, I'm sure everybody went home with the a little memory peg saying, "Okay, what am I going to do?"
Right. Yep. What am I going to do? Folks, there is a lot of good, we have a number of good programs that were broadcast from the conference last week. You can catch them in our archives. I Unfortunately, Z, one of the ones that you and I were a part of that was the most fun was a rousing panel discussion. There were 9 of us on a couch, a bench, a handful of chairs. I think some of us were even sitting on the knee wall by the end. Unfortunately, folks, if you go search that out in the archives, there's a little bit of audio problems with it. But you can definitely catch the gist of what we were sharing. You can hear the content. The audio just gets blown out and broken out. It's a little hot sometimes. But Z, if you can remember that conversation, as you remember looking around that room, um, there were some very progressive perspectives on where New Thought ought to be heading. I'd love to hear your perspective based on what you experienced last week, what we've been talking about, you and I, for months and months now,
Right.
and what the organization is, what the Centers for Spiritual Living as an organization is saying. Are we aligned? Are we pointing the way? Help us see the way.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, I think as I kind of said to me, the gauntlet has been thrown down. That compels us to take a look at ourselves and our principles and what we believe and the core concepts and all of that, and see how aligned we are with current events, current way of living, current mandates for spiritual communities, regardless to affiliation. If we're telling people we have a tool or a resource that allows people to live a better life and to be more uh I'm going to say accepting, but I don't like that word because it's loaded. But that's the best one I can come up with right now.
Let's not
um,
use tolerant. We're not
yeah, no,
we're not going to use
I
tolerant
definitely
anymore.
skipped right by that one. But the ability for organizations and individuals who have either proclaimed or has been anointed with the idea that they have a perspective on living a whole life.
Right.
I think that's what that conversation was trying to get at, and looking at different perspectives of where we've come from, where we are now, and given the new landscape and quite frankly the disruption of services and disseminating this information in a consistent, I won't say coherent because I think it's been coherent, but hasn't been consistent because of how it's being delivered, whether it's in person, online, and all the stuff to go with that. So
Right.
with that, I think we're it's almost like the old Zen saying, everybody has to empty their cup and start over,
Yes. Yes.
because the old playing field, the old rules and all of that stuff no longer exists.
Yes. One of the casualties of COVID happens to have been the rule book. um, and we're rewriting those rule books. Folks, we want to share a portion of what we experienced just a short week ago. This is what we want to do is share a clip with you of the talk given by Reverend Dr. Edward Villon. He is currently the spiritual leader of the Centers for Spiritual Living, and he gave quite uh, an in-depth and impassioned speech on the opening night of the conference. We do not have the time or the permission to share the whole thing, and truthfully, uh, it's not ours to share the whole thing. But we think it's important to share some clips here, and we have one prepared for you that we want to share and then discuss this. So this is about 4 to 5 minutes long. It is a really this comes at about halfway through his speech, I believe it is, and he's really building to his call. But this is part of. Uh, uh, well, I don't want to give it away yet, so we'll hold off on on the big reveal of where he goes with this eventually. But I want you to hear part of this ramp up. Again, this is Reverend Dr. Edward Villon, Senior Spiritual Director of the Centers for Spiritual Living.
Was younger and I first found science of mind, I developed, well, a kind of fear of negative thinking. So I avoided or hid anything that was disturbing or conflictual because I thought it said something about my wholeness as a spiritual being. No, I'm so sorry that I went that way. I wish I had read these words of the activist and um, child advocate, what is her name? L.R. Noss. She wrote these words: "Do not be dismayed by the brokenness of the world. All things break, and all things can be mended, not with time, as they say, but with intention. So go, love intentionally, extravagantly, unconditionally. The broken world waits in darkness for the light that is you." Is that not a clarion call for our teaching? Love intentionally, extravagantly, unconditionally. Oh, plant those seeds now, because I think the beloved community of 10 years' time, in 10 years' time, will benefit from those fruits. I really do. Because things happen. And we've had so much loss in this past year. What is it? Over 5 million people dead from the pandemic. And also, Bishop John Shelby Spong died in September last year. And also Archbishop Desmond Tutu, December, the day after Christmas. Two giants of spiritual heroism, each with their own clarion call to spiritual people like us to stay relevant and engaged and real, to stand in the glorious mess and face it, and to not hide from it or avoid it, and to love intentionally and extravagantly and unconditionally. They were not afraid to stand in the darkness and shine their light. You know, Bishop Spong was a friend of Centers for Spiritual Living. Yeah. He spoke at our Sillamar conference one year. Maybe some of you were there. Oh my goodness, I remember it. So he said something about how Christianity, for it to remain viable and to survive, had to examine and rethink some of its teachings. Oh, and we applauded. We applauded his boldness. And I remember then clapping, thinking, should the same not be true for our Centers for Spiritual Living? should we not rigorously examine our teaching in light of what is known today so that we can stay relevant? I'm certain Dr. Ernest Holmes would. He would want that. And it's happening anyway, whether we want it or not. The difficult questions are asking themselves without permission. Because as we learn about privilege and bias and classism, etc., the world over, these questions cannot be held back. Yeah. It doesn't matter if we want to hear them or not. You know, a colleague of ours, a Science of Mind colleague, asked me, he's talking about himself, he said, is it only my consciousness that brought me to this place of success? Or did my privilege have something to do with it? In the same week, another colleague, a Science of Mind minister, called me and said, Edward, talking about himself, he said, Edward, am I in a position of power and influence solely because of my spiritual practice, or did the societal bias toward my gender and race have something to do with it? Oh, these questions cannot be stopped. And to remain relevant and viable, we have to keep step with them. We have to answer them. And we have to find a modern expression of our beloved Science of Mind that does not blame victims for their experience. But instead teaches us to have minds that can hold the complexity and the ambiguity and the contradiction of being human with all of its nuances, and to remain open to the full range of feelings that go with being a messy human being perched behind a filter.
You're muted.
Oh, sorry about that. I think that was the first moment in the conference where I looked over and went, wow, this might get real.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you remember your thoughts as you were listening to Edward at that time?
I do. It came rushing back. There was a couple of things that popped out. And I think if I had to choose of the couple of things there, the whole idea of relevance came to mind. And it still sticks out to me today when we look at young and old, regardless of race, color, gender, orientation, or anything, just at a personal level, everyone is looking at the relevance of their life, I believe. And then when you put on top of that, what is the relevance of my spiritual life in conjunction with my whole life?
Right.
There's a lot of soul searching that I think everyone will be compelled to do, because oftentimes we separate our personal life from our spiritual life. And I know in this tradition, we teach that they are one and the same, because we know thought creates manifestation. And so if we have this disconjointed thought, what are we beginning to put in place to be demonstrated?
Right.
And so as we begin to figure out the relevance of our spiritual teachings and how they dovetail or enlighten, excuse me, our personal relevance, that intersect becomes more and more important now.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that was the compelling thing. Excuse me, we can no longer live our lives in compartments, because in actuality, in a wholeness, there is no compartments. There's a focus on a specific aspect of the whole, but it's not compartmentalized. You can't look at it or deal with it in isolation. And so that, I think, for me, was the most compelling thing that I got from that.
Yes, absolutely. I remember this is also the moment in his talk where I thought to myself, I know a whole bunch of people that need to hear this. And the lead up to that portion of the talk, folks, Dr. Edward was reflecting on how Centers for Spiritual Living has grown in 10 years. And in the 10 years since we became this organization, Centers for Spiritual Living, is 10 years old. The philosophy is much older. The organizations that predated it are much, much older. But in terms of true structural organization, we are still, I'm going to get rid of the term quite young, but we're still learning to grow up all over each other. That's for sure.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, there are people that have abandoned this movement and this organization. There are people that are actively attacking this organization for its stand and its beliefs and its practices without getting the full picture.
Right.
I believe. And I believe that this talk and other portions of this that we'll also discuss really did lead us to recognize this organization is prepared and willing to face the challenge and of what we have to do today, so that in another 10 years, those that follow behind us will say it's a bit easier or more real living in a world that works for all.
Yeah. Yeah. And see, that speaks clearly to the other point that came up, or one of the other points that came up that Dr. Edward brought up, was the whole idea of privilege.
Yes.
Because relevance and privilege are paramount in any teaching, I think, especially when you start talking about mystical teachings or esoteric teachings, which we fall into that category in some ways. So now we begin to look at this whole thing about, how do we deal with that? And if we're operating from a state now where, after the past 2 years and everything has happened, where the mantra across the globe is inclusion.
Yep.
And not to marginalize that inclusion, not to categorize it, not to set it up as some tolerant at the table. We have to bring full participants to the table. And if we're still operating from a privileged mindset, that will be a very difficult chore to stay relevant and to be practical and applicable at the same time, which is what a way of life should be.
Yeah. And I do see people in our movement and organizations, and I say organizations, folks, because this is New Thought today. It's not just Science of Mind or Centers for Spiritual Living. We want to look and talk to thought leaders in all of the various aspects of New Thought and versions and demonstrations of New Thought. But what I sorry, talk myself right out of my point there.
Right.
She'll come right back.
Yep.
So, or not.
But, this may spawn it, because I think you might have been going in this direction. There was another point, and I'm not quite sure how he made it, but he made this point about not running away from conflict is one thing I picked up.
Yes.
And oftentimes, I know early on in my experiences with this teaching, people didn't want to deal with conflict. They didn't want to deal with negative concepts or negative ideas or anything that was challenging in
Right.
that kind of a way.
This is that racy race mentality
Yes.
that I never liked.
No.
Like, I said it. I can't erase that. And I can't erase that there was a thought in my head that let me say that.
Yeah.
But what I can do is take ownership. And I had an experience like that during this conference where it was in passing. A colleague was going one way, I was going another way. We've been chit-chatting all week long, and it wasn't derogatory. It wasn't sexist. It was ageist.
Mm-hmm.
And this term fell out of my mouth. And I was, one, mortally embarrassed. Like, in the light of the conversation we've been having all week, for me to do that is just like, oops. Oh, big, huge red face. And,
Mm-hmm.
and I turned around and I apologized and I made amends and I owned up to it that, wow, that was really, really a learning opportunity. And all's good and all's well because it's not a prevailing thought. But the truth is, I can't erase that. I said it. Something in me let that through. And until I deal with whatever that is, conscious or subconscious belief pattern, it'll continue to run and operate in my life.
Right. Right. And one thing that says to me in terms of my big takeaway is relevance. And not running away from conflict is the idea that we must remain vigilant in our awareness of where we are, the environment we're in, what our filters are, what triggers us. I could go on and on and on about how we must, if we're going to be successful. Now, you don't need to do this if we don't want to create a better world or a world that works for everyone.
Right.
But if that's something that kind of vaguely piques your curiosity, then we need to begin being aware of ourselves in space. What are we thinking? What old habits are still there, no matter how long you've been in a specific teaching or training? The old habits are still there. We have to, when you replace one, you don't get rid of it. You just replace it with something that's more relevant.
Yeah.
And
the old operating system is still there.
There.
8.1 is still there, even though you might be running 8.5.
Right. We've enhanced it to bypass certain things or not to fall into certain traps. And that's what we need to do right now. That no one never does a total rewrite of our operating system.
Yep. I now remember the point where I wanted to make, and it was around the piece of privilege.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had it shared with me by a dear friend and a dear colleague that I wouldn't fit as a guest speaker in their community. And a big part of that is because he's a middle-aged white guy, much like I am. And he has made a commitment to his community that if he's not on the pulpit, he's going to make sure that whoever is on the pulpit helps to create a broader perspective and demonstration of diversity and inclusion in our communities.
Right.
And so it's actually his policy to not bring people in, no matter how great of friends we may be, no matter how good the talk may be, no matter what the event may be, to make those conscious efforts to overcome that, especially as a white guy, especially as a white male, to overcome those privileges and help to dismantle the biases that created them.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's important. We're doing the work. We're doing the work. Think sometimes we have to keep reminding each other that we're all doing the work.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's powerful to me because I look at where we want to go as an organization, and I look at some of the tendencies and things that we've done in the past that don't support that direction or support that statement. Now, definitely the I think all of the pieces are there, but are they relevant? Right? Are they just a paper tiger, or is it a relevant thing that's being put out? And I think everyone, has the desire to move in that direction. We have to begin to come up with version 2.0, if you will, of the operating system that relies heavily on the new direction, the new challenges that we face. Because if we're still talking about old problems and how you can solve them, well, nobody's going to listen, because we got new problems now. And some of the things that we defined as old problems previously, we're like, shucks, that wasn't even really a problem. That was my hang up. Let me move beyond that and deal with some of these real problems that are affecting myself, my family, my friends, and my organization. Your sound.
Don't know why that wants to keep doing that. Folks, you're watching New Thought today on the New Thought Media Network. I'm Rev Briz, my co-host and partner in love and exploration, Rev Z here. We're going to take a quick break, let ourselves learn a little bit more about some of the new things that are happening around the network, and say thank you to our sponsors. Give us 2 minutes. We'll be right back with more on New Thought today.
One power, one power. One power, one power, one power, one power. There's one power invisible, and you see it everywhere and every day. One power in
Thank you, Center for Spiritual Living Denver, for your continued support. Thank you, Center for Spiritual Living Midtown Atlanta, for your monthly contribution. Thank you, Center for Spiritual Living North Jersey, for your monthly contribution. And please help us welcome Om Center for Spiritual Living in La Mesa, California. Thank you for your monthly donation. Thank you, Center for Spiritual Living Seattle, for your most generous donation. And a special thanks to Heckerland Foundation for your generous technology grant. And Suze Ajit, thank you for your very generous donation. And a big shout out to all our committed donors.
And we're back with more on the New Thought Media Network. This is New Thought Today. I'm Rev Briz over on this side.
Rev Z right here.
And we're just here having a good old time talking about the future of New Thought and how New Thought can impact, influence, inspire, uplift, and promote the what else? The future of humanity, as it were. And we've been talking a bit about the Centers for Spiritual Living, a convention that we both had the opportunity to attend last week. And Z, I want to, in the second half here a bit, I want to talk about another. So to wrap up, Reverend Edwards' talk eventually leads us to the reminder that as a movement, and that includes every one of us, we have a moral and spiritual imperative to take this philosophy out into the world and demonstrate it out into the world. And for the remainder of the conference, I felt that's exactly what we got to witness. From that point forward, what we witnessed were demonstrations of how people are taking this philosophy, taking that moral and spiritual imperative, and activating it, demonstrating it in the world. And I think one of the most powerful was the keynote by Gabrielle Claiborne, and to experience this woman in her and her message was absolutely amazing. I'm sorry, folks, I don't have a clip of that one this week. Maybe next week or so we'll have a clip of that. But see, fill people in a little bit more on who Gabrielle is and the message that she brought to us.
Right, and so Gabrielle is a transgender science of mind devotee, if you will, and she gave a talk about her journey, very boldly, very compassionate, and very heartfelt. I felt in terms of looking at the challenges that any individuals, but her journey specifically, that one has to go through to reach that level of self-confidence and poise and articulation, which are all the things that she displayed quite boldly and quite commanding, that gives us pause to think about what's relevant, how we going to be making a place for everyone at the table to contribute, because clearly there's a lot to be contributed from Gabrielle.
Yes. And she shared with us in so many ways throughout the week. And this is part of what I love. And I want to say, folks, I really appreciate this was not a conference of I'm going to show up the day I'm supposed to speak. I'm going to speak, and then I'm going to stick around for a couple of cocktails, and I'll be gone by breakfast. All of our presenters were with us throughout the week. Mm-hmm. And Gabrielle especially was very approachable, very available to be with people and help people through the process. In so many ways, from the stage and just in her presence, she taught us, I believe, how to be better humans, how to connect more, and how to respect and honor the desires of the people we're connected with. She shared with us on microaggressions, and I remember that let's just say she was one of the most stunning women in the room at all times, very well dressed. And she shared how even as few as just a few weeks back, she was misgendered. And I thought to myself, that has to be an act of aggression, because if what you see is not the beauty before you, but the perception of what you think that beauty should have been, that's a place. I trust that didn't happen in our conference all that much to her. I trust she was very welcomed and lovingly welcomed. And she is a member of the Center for Spiritual Living Atlanta, and that community. Reverend Dr. David Alexander is the spiritual leader down there, and they and such a magnificent expression of being your authentic self.
Right.
It's very refreshing.
And again, I mean, the term of being authentic, right? I keep harping on the one note, right? Relevance.
Relevance.
Relevance. she understands her relevance and what she brings to the table, and she's bringing it.
Yeah.
Whether someone feels whatever or not, she's not letting someone's opinion become her opinion, nor restricting her from putting her song in the world, if you will.
Yes. I found it, again, very refreshing for us. And as an organization, this is to me the demonstration that we are facing the issues that we've been called out upon.
Yeah.
Or our growing edge.
Yes. Yes.
Right. There's been a real call within Centers for Spiritual Living over the past few years, 4 or 5 years now, to really let's look at a deeper level at our white privilege.
Yeah.
Let's take a little deeper look at our cis male gendered centric organization and how we can make the changes. And I do see changes.
Yeah.
You stepped forward this year and offered yourself up as a sacrificial offered yourself up in leadership, and was elected to the Ministers' Council for the Centers for Spiritual Living. You're going to have a few years to help promote that. And I know there were other initiatives that are happening. I will share with you. I heard somebody refer to it as the Black Dinner. I had to pull them aside and have a little bit of a correction on that one with them. But tell us a little bit more. What do you see as a Black man and a Black man stepping into leadership in this organization? What are we looking at moving forward? What's the call there?
Well, it's just funny that you say that someone said, because that's always been an issue, no matter what. If you were in high school and you were bussed into an all-white school, which I was, and the Black kids would sit at the same table for lunch, because we weren't welcome at the other table if we wanted to sit there. But it also gave us a chance to talk about things facing us specifically, or that we needed to address within ourselves specifically. And so that was how I looked at our meeting, lunching, dinner, whatever people want to call it. It is a opportunity for us as a segment of society to be clear about what it is we have to offer and how do we get that broadcasted, if you will. And at the same time, we're still dealing with the world that operates out of privilege, and not quite reached its adulthood or its early adulthood on how to be accepting of all people. I mean, Dr. Elwood made a statement about speaking with the colleague who said, I do work in corporate America where I go in and talk with some of the most powerful leaders in corporate America with this teaching, with this perspective on life, and I am received very well. However, I come back to my own community and I'm looked at very differently and not as embracing as a person of color. And so we still have some things to deal with. And so by being able to share experiences and approaches and so forth and so on, it gives that segment of the group a chance to make itself more visible, stronger, more articulate, however people want to, it's like an organ in the body. When one organ is not working properly, it affects the whole organization.
Yep. I have a sense that at some point, I don't know that I remember actually hearing this, but I'm sure the energy was in the room that, we're diverse. We have Black churches. And we're finally learning from that.
Yeah.
And in that person that said, they weren't at the Black dinner, I think they were actually a little jealous. Is part of it. Like they wanted to know. They wanted to know what was going on.
And the funny thing about it, if a bunch of our white colleagues had a dinner, and they did, no one questioned why are they meeting, what are they talking about, what are they doing. right? It was a group of people who had an affinity.
Yep.
And they met, and so it's the same thing. And you know, it may take a minute. I hope it don't. I hope only it takes seconds and not minutes. For
Well, now that you're on the job, dude.
Yeah.
Now that you're on the job, I expect some stuff to be changed. You know,
and because pretty soon we're gonna have Hispanic Latino group meeting together to talk about their concerns or their issues or their approaches to further the teaching and address certain issues.
That's yes. Again, what I hope you're hearing here today on this program, folks, is we're not just saying stuff anymore. And we're not just stopping at one initiative at a time. I really do believe Centers for Spiritual Living is prepared and poised to be the change we keep talking about in all these various social segments.
And you know, that just brings to mind, there was a statement made, at the conference, that they're preparing right now to translate some of the materials into Swahili.
Yes.
And if there's always been a big push to transfer it into Spanish, and now we're going to Swahili, and who knows what's next, right? There are a number of African countries where this teaching is being taught, where there are centers for learning that are there and in place. And to be able to put it in a native language so the translation gets less and so forth is going to be a huge lift for a world that works for everyone.
Yes. You mentioned Africa and New Thought Media Network. We want to be a part of that. We're blazing the trail. We've got a practitioner from Kenya, and I'm sorry, the name is escaping me at the moment. And she has been on the prayer program and is coming on our prayer team and is going to start recording prayer broadcasts from Kenya to share with us here on the network. There are no limits in the universe to where this philosophy can be practiced or how it can be practiced. We keep coming back to, are we practicing it? What is the relevance of our practice?
And I think because Ernest made this as a container for like experience, if you will, and intersections of all the different teachings and faith, it doesn't demand that someone gives up a teaching or a spiritual practice that they've learned from their infancy or from their place of origin that still serves them.
Yes.
This is not throw the baby out with the bathwater kind of stuff here.
Right. And you strike me because you hit on something for me, right? Because this is the point where 90% of the people will go, well, Ernest never wanted churches anyway. Yeah. We've all heard that. That's not the point. That's not it doesn't matter what Ernest wanted at this point anyway. At this point, we have to realize that this philosophy was taken into churches. Now, I do believe it was Ernest's belief to take this into the churches and into different religions and organizations, and through, humanity, the messiness of humanity, we created our own churches and our own organizations, and then we didn't like the word church anymore, so we became centers and yada, 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 yada. All of that has to remain valid because it happened. And we have to honor that the movement had to go through those stages and had to go through those experiences so that people like us and others, and we saw some of that at the convention too, some really innovative ways of sharing and presenting this information coming through, that I've heard it again and again. I heard it on a phone call just before this show. We are evolving. And the science of mind, Edward said this in his talk, the science of mind of the 1930s has and will continue to evolve. And the science of mind of the 2030s will have to and will continue to evolve as well.
Right. Well, and the beauty of that, in my mind, is that, when Ernest set the teachings up, it was principle based.
Yes.
which means, and not law-based, right? Which a lot of orthodox paths are. They're law-based. But when something is principle-based, it's set up in my mind to always be relevant, because from that principle, I can always extract new laws. And, you know, if you heard me before, my principle one is electricity. You know, there's a principle of electricity, but I can create a law or extract a law from that principle to create hydroelectricity and thermoelectricity and turboelectricity and, you know, God knows what else electricity laws that I can extract to meet the principle to produce the thing itself, if you will.
Yep. Nuclear power, fusion, we got them all, right?
Yes.
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 Folks, New Thought Media Network, we want to be part of that next thought, the evolution of New Thought, the coming decades of what New Thought can be.
Yeah.
And what we know is we're never going to do that alone. We're never going to do that in a vacuum. We're going to do that in collaboration and in partnership, where we transcend the apparent lines of division that we call denominationalism, or that we look at different religions in different ways. I have long held the only thing in the world to be religious about is your own version of spirituality, your own spiritual experience. And Centers for Spiritual Living, I believe, is poised to embrace that, support that, and allow us to find all these various intersections where I would never have as rich and full of a life as I do if it weren't for the conversations you and I have had, Z. If it weren't being exposed to, in this conference, we did have a transgender teen represented by video, a transgender female and transgender male share the stage, including a transgender female keynote, Gabrielle, as we were mentioning earlier. I know it's fairly unprecedented for us. I don't know how unprecedented that is in the world of spiritual communities and religions. But I know that it was a demonstration of a consciousness that we have been creating. And again and again and again, I'm going to keep holding that the state of the nation is good. And all of these various initiatives, which are often born of just our blindness.
Right.
Are being healed, are coming forward to be not just healed. I don't want that to sound like, you know, oh, we got to exercise this, we got to heal this out of the body of that is CSL. We've got to heal that into a full integration, a wholeness, a systematic integration. Brother Wayne Teasdale, with the concept of interspirituality, the shared experience across traditions. I think we can do that in New Thought, share our experiences across the various New Thought traditions, and that includes a historically Black expression of that, and a historically transgender or gender evolving. I think the term, right? If that's the correct term, gender evolving. All these places where we can come together and live this philosophy out loud.
Yeah, and you know, just to speak to that, you know, historically and more traditionally, when you look at spiritual communities from a white perspective and a Black perspective, the white perspective is more heady, more theoretical, and a Black perspective is more spiritual and more heartfelt. Not that one is better than the other. That's just a tradition that they grew up in, and what was needed at the time to propel everybody to a place where they needed to be, for whatever reason, right? You know, a lot of people have used those kinds of terms in the past in a bad way to cause all kind of disparities. But I mean, you know, I'm good on the metaphor. So it's like, you know, in baseball, and they got pinch hitters. You know, I don't want this person. Their job is to pinch hit, not throw a ball, not catch a ball. When I need a hit, I'm calling this person to the page. And other than that, they're doing their thing. Yeah. And so in that same perspective, different cultures, different religious perspectives are born out of those cultures, and that's just the way it is. That's just life.
Yeah. Folks, this is New Thought Today on the New Thought Media Network. We're about running out of time here. Before we go, we do want to say another quick thank you to all of our sponsors and everyone that makes this possible. All you have to do to be a part of that is head over to the website, ntmedia.org, click on the donate button, and you'll see an option to make a monthly donation. We want to thank you for doing that and continuing to support this mighty network in the work that we are doing. We've got a few things coming up we want you to know about. Number one, let's get rid of some of these banners. This coming weekend, we got a full weekend this weekend. Oh my God. Daniel Nahmon is in concert on Saturday. And then on Sunday, it is our Gandhi King Season for Nonviolence 2022 opening ceremonies. This is the 25th year of the Gandhi King Season for Nonviolence. It's going to happen at 2 p.m. here on the New Thought Media Network. Look at that lineup. Sharif Abdullah. You've heard us talk about all these people. Sharif Abdullah, Reverend Dr. Roger Teal, Reverend Dr. Deborah Johnson, Reverend Dr. Michael Beckwith, musical guests Harold Payne and Faith Rivera. I myself and dear Cynthia Hensley will be the MCs for the evening. We invite you to join us for that. I promise you, we're going to have a great, great time. And as I said, on Saturday, 2 o'clock Mountain Time here on the New Thought Media Network, New Dawn Center for Spiritual Living and the New Thought Media Network present live in concert from Colorado, Daniel Nahmon. You can catch it in person or online. If you want to know how to get there in person, send an email, newdawncsl@gmail.com. If you want to watch live online, just tune into New Thought Media Network and our channels. And this is going to be a love offering donation. All are welcome. We would love to have you join us for any of our upcoming events. All right, Z, final thoughts. What do we wait. One last thing before we go. Our dear friends, Reverend Kathy and Laura Topper, have their program that premieres right before ours now, and it comes on an hour before we do. It's called Wisdom of the Mystics, and their guest today was Reverend Dr. Jesse Jennings. What a great interview. I'm sure it was. I had another meeting, and Z, you got to catch a little of it. Give us just a quick overview. How good was it?
It was really good. I mean, if you know Dr. Jennings, I mean, he's a wealth of information on our movement and the history and Ernest. He's got a couple of books out. So, you know, it was very lively. It was very informative. And I'm a fan, and I'm looking forward to following that show on the 2nd and 4th Tuesdays to make sure I stay informed. I'm sure with Reverend Kathy and Laura that there's going to be great hosts, great guests and great information that's coming in the near future.
Yes. All right, folks, before we go, do remember you can reach out to us at ministertalk@ntmedia.org.
No sound.
I got to fix that. Let us know, folks. ministertalk@ntmedia.org. Who would you like to see? See, I didn't touch anything there.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on.
We've got some great guests coming on next week. Reverend Patty Rumsel will be with us next week. And we got a whole lot of commitments from ministers last week to join us in the near future. So we look forward to seeing you there. All right. I didn't click myself off that time, but now we are. Until next time. Peace.
Peace.